On this day in 1901, a grandstand collapsed during Celtic's Scottish Cup third round tie against Dundee at Dens Park. The most tragic incident in the early days of Scottish football was the Ibrox disaster of 1902. But with the size of the crowds flocking to matches in what were referred to as enclosures that could barely cope with the numbers, it was more by luck than judgment that equally serious incidents were not recorded before then. One such near miss occurred at the recently built Dens Park on the 16th of February 1901 when Celtic visited to play a Scottish Cup third round tie against Dundee. Dundee v Celtic had over the years become one of the most keenly contested fixtures of the season, and a huge crowd was drawn to what was expected to be a monumental tie. The league championship was usually completed by January at that time, and Rangers had won it for the third time in a row, while Celtic, having knocked the Ibrox club out in the first round, were bidding to match the achievements of Queen's Park and Vale of Leven in winning the more prestigious competition 3 times in succession. The Scottish referee reported on the 18th of February 1901, "Celt's special to Dundee was one of the best in recent years, fully 900 travelling, 100 in training in Courtbridge. Secretary Maley's big bill, ground playable, at the Central, was of great use to the intending travellers, who duly took their tickets and seats." More than 17,000 spectators crammed into Dens Park as Celtic lined up Donnelly, Davidson, Battles, Russell, Loney, Orr, McCustra, Divers, Campbell, McMahon, Findlay. Willie Maley's ground playable bill at Central Station was helpful but probably inaccurate. A severe frost in midweek had given way to a thaw and the going was very heavy. The Dundee Evening Post of the 18th of February, after describing it as one of the most exciting matches ever played in Dundee, reported, "The state of the pitch had a considerable effect on the play. The ball quickly became clogged with mud and accurate passing became out of the question. Ankle deep in mud, the players were severely handicapped, and it was really a wonder that the football served up was as good as it was. The referee could not have been blamed had he declared the match a friendly." By most accounts, it was a hard-fought, evenly contested encounter, the North British Mail of the 18th of February describing it as an eager and exciting one, each side playing cup-tie football of the most robust kind. The newspapers were unanimous that Celtic's greater weight, a euphemism for physicality, won the day, with Barney Battles well to the fore. The Dundee papers were adamant that Celtic had been lucky and that Dundee deserved at least a replay. The only goal was scored by Robert Findlay, a summer signing from Kilmarnock who played only that one season for Celtic, and it came with a touch of controversy. The Dundee Evening Telegraph correspondent reported on the 18th of February, "When Campbell went off that time near midfield, he was not in a legitimate position. There was only one back and goalkeeper in front of him, and the ball was passed from behind. Although Stewart did save Campbell's shot, it was only to be beaten a second or two later by Findlay from the return. Thus, had Campbell been declared offside, as to my mind he was, then Findlay would not have had the opportunity of scoring." Robert Findlay returned to Kilmarnock at the end of the season, and after retiring in 1911, emigrated to New Jersey. His son played for the USA in the football tournaments at the Olympic Games of 1924 and 1928. The collapse of the wooden grandstand came early in the second half, and it was only by sheer luck no one was fatally injured. The Dundee Courier reported on the 18th of February, "Shortly after the second half began, a cry of alarm was heard to proceed from those sitting at the north end of the staging, and it was observed that the erection was collapsing. The alarm was all the greater when it was seen the whole erection, about 40 yards in length, had collapsed, and hundreds of spectators were thrown to the ground from a height of about 17 feet. Great excitement and confusion prevailed for a time. Those who were able scrambled from the wreckage and tried to obtain a position where they could view the game. Others met with more serious mishap. Heavy pieces of timber pinioned them to the ground, while 100 of people were thrown upon them. A posse of policemen and several medical gentlemen hurried to the scene of the accident and attended to those injured. Several young men lay full length on the ground moaning with pain, while around them were gathered a number of helpers. Several boys also met with injuries, a number of them being severely cut about the head. Several of those injured were removed to the infirmary. The worst case was that of Peter McGinn, 25, residing in Hawk Hill, who suffered from severe shock and bruises to various parts of his body. A young lad named Alexander McIntosh, 8, Rose Street, also received treatment at the infirmary for severe injuries to his head, while a young man was also admitted suffering from a fractured rib. 2 other young lads, named James Sharp, Hilltown, and John Nolan, Lochie Road, were removed to their homes in a cab. None of the injured were retained at the infirmary, as after having their injuries attended to, they were able to proceed home. The Dens Park stand was on a much smaller scale than the West Tribune stand that collapsed during the Scotland-England match at Ibrox little over a year later, and following this, wood and steel constructions were phased out and replaced with solid earth terracing, the most famous example being the new Hampden Park, built in 1903.